No one understood why the fire went out that night. The flames had been roaring only moments before, high, hungry, alive, when suddenly they collapsed into themselves, as if something unseen had reached out and silenced them. Sparks hissed and died in the dirt. Smoke curled upward, confused, embarrassed, gone. People froze. Children stopped laughing. Drums fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. In the center of the clearing stood a woman, her hands empty, her eyes steady. She did not blow on the embers. She did not reach for the wood. She simply stepped back. Someone screamed for her to relight it. She didn't move. The cold crept in fast, unnatural for a night that should have been warm. Shadows stretched longer than they should have. The darkness felt heavier, closer, almost personal. A baby began to cry. Still, the woman did nothing. Elders whispered her name like a warning. Others backed away, fear tightening their chests. Fire was life. Fire was protection. Fire was survival. And yet, there she stood, calm, unmoved, watching the last red glow fade into black. That was the moment everyone realized this was not an accident. She was refusing the fire. And whatever her reason was, it was powerful enough to let the world go cold. By morning, the village looked exactly the way it always had. The sun rose gently over the red earth, warming the clay walls of the homes and pulling thin lines of smoke from cooking fires back into the sky. Goats wandered between huts, bells clinking softly. Women swept the ground with bundled grass, drawing slow, patient circles in the dust. Children chased one another barefoot, their laughter echoing between the trees. Life continued. The river near the village moved at its usual pace, unbothered by the silence of the night before. Fishermen stood knee-deep in the water, casting their nets with practiced hands. The air smelled of grain, wood, and morning dew. Somewhere, a mortar struck rhythmically as maize was ground for the day's meal. Fire returned to its rightful place in the center of everything. Small flames danced beneath clay pots. Embers glowed softly beside doorways. Smoke rose like a daily prayer, familiar and comforting. No one spoke about the night. Not out loud. In this village, fire was more than heat. It was memory. It was storytelling, passed from elder to child as faces flickered orange in the dark. It was the sound of meat sizzling, the cure for cold, the line between safety and the wild beyond the trees. Without fire, night was dangerous. And yet, by daylight, danger felt far away. The elders gathered beneath the wide shade of the baobab tree, speaking of harvests and weather. Young men repaired fishing nets. Mothers tied cloth around their babies' backs and moved through the day with practiced strength. The village breathed in its familiar rhythm, steady and unbroken. Only one detail felt different. At the edge of the village, near a hut set slightly apart, there was no smoke. No ash. No embers. No warmth. The woman who lived there prepared her food in silence, eating it cold. She warmed her hands in the sun instead of over flame. When night came, her doorway remained dark, untouched by firelight. People noticed, of course. They always noticed. But in the daylight, with the sun high and the village alive, it was easy to pretend it meant nothing. Easy to believe that whatever happened by the fire the night before belonged to the darkness, not to the living world of morning. Still, when children passed her hut, they lowered their voices. When elders looked her way, their conversations slowed. Because even in the calm of an ordinary day, everyone could feel it. The fire was burning again. Just not for her. Her name was Ao. Most people said it softly, as if speaking too loudly might disturb something fragile around her. She had lived in the village for as long as anyone could remember, yet no one could recall the day she arrived. It was as if she had always been there, quietly present, like a shadow that belongs to the earth itself. Ao was kind. That much was certain. She helped carry water for the elderly. She mended torn cloth without being asked. When children scraped their knees, she cleaned the wounds with gentle hands and calming words. Her smile was small, never demanding attention, but it stayed with you longer than you expected. She did not raise her voice. She did not argue. She did not explain. And she never, ever used fire. Not for cooking. Not for warmth. Not even for light. When the rains came and the nights turned cold, Ao wrapped herself in extra cloth and slept beneath the stars rather than step inside a hut lit by flame. When meals were prepared, she accepted whatever was offered, even if it was uncooked or long gone cold. If someone urged her to sit closer to the fire, she simply shook her head and moved away. No anger, no fear, just refusal. At first, people assumed it was a personal vow, a spiritual choice. In the village, everyone respected unseen promises. But as time passed, the questions grew heavier. Fire was not optional. It was how food was made safe, how sickness was fought, how darkness was kept at bay. To reject it was to reject life itself, or so it seemed. Still, Ao never criticized those who used fire. She never warned them, never begged them to stop. When others lit their flames, she turned her face slightly away, as if out of respect rather than fear. There were moments, though, small ones, that unsettled people. If a spark jumped too high, Ao's body tensed. If smoke thickened suddenly, her eyes darkened with something deeper than concern. Once, when a child tripped and knocked over a torch, Ao crossed the space faster than anyone else, pulling the child back just before the flame spread. Her hands never touched the fire. Her movements were precise, urgent, practiced. Too practiced. Why? Some villagers finally asked her. Ao only smiled. "It is better this way," she said once, her voice barely louder than the wind. Better for whom, she never clarified. The elders watched her closely. They saw the way she studied fire from a distance, counting its movements, measuring its hunger. They noticed that she never turned her back on it until it was fully extinguished. As if she understood something about fire that the rest of them did not. As if she was waiting. And whatever she was waiting for, it had not come yet. At first, the village tried to ignore the pattern. It was easier that way. But patterns have a way of demanding attention, especially when they repeat themselves too precisely to be coincidence. Whenever something went wrong with fire, Ao was nearby. Not close enough to touch it. Not close enough to be blamed. Just present. One evening, a cooking fire refused to catch. The wood was dry, the tinder prepared carefully, yet the flame sputtered and died again and again. Frustrated voices rose. Children grew hungry. Before anyone could speak her name, someone noticed Ao standing at the edge of the circle, watching the embers with an unreadable expression. Moments later, the fire finally took. Another time, a sudden gust of wind bent the flames of the communal fire dangerously close to a row of huts. People shouted and rushed forward with water. But before panic could spread, the wind shifted. The fire calmed. When the danger passed, Ao was already walking away, her shoulders tight, as if she had been holding her breath. These moments were small, but they stayed with people. Whispers followed her path through the village. Some said fire behaved differently around her. Others said she carried a blessing or a curse. A few wondered if she was hiding something the elders had forgotten. Still, when confronted, Ao offered nothing more than fragments. "Fire listens," she said once, when a woman pressed her for answers. "Listens to what? To whom?" She never said. The curiosity deepened the night an elder's hut nearly burned down. A spark leapt from the hearth and caught the edge of the roof. Flames climbed quickly, licking at the dry thatch. Shouts filled the air. Buckets were passed hand to hand. In the chaos, someone saw Ao standing alone, eyes locked on the rising fire. Her lips moved silently, though no words could be heard. Then, without warning, the roof beam cracked and collapsed inward, smothering the flames beneath a rain of ash and dust. The hut was damaged, but it did not burn. No one could explain why. Some called it luck. Others called it intervention. A few began to fear her. When questioned, Ao's answer was the same as always. "I did nothing." It was true, in a way. No one had seen her touch the fire. No one had seen her interfere. And yet, too many near disasters ended the same way when she was present. Safe. Contained. Unfinished. The elders met in secret that night, voices low and troubled. They spoke of old stories, half-remembered warnings passed down from generations long gone. Stories about fire that was not just a tool, but a living force. A force that remembered those who had wronged it. Ao's name was spoken carefully. The next morning, people watched her more closely than ever. Not with anger. Not yet. With uncertainty. Because every answer she gave felt like a door left half open. And behind that door, something was waiting to be understood. The change did not come all at once. It crept in quietly, the way fear often does, disguised as coincidence, wrapped in small, deniable moments. Fires burned hotter than usual. Smoke lingered longer in the air. Embers jumped farther than they should have, landing where no flame belonged. People began to notice how often Ao was asked to leave. Not out of cruelty. Out of discomfort. When she approached a hearth, conversations faltered. When she passed a cooking fire, someone instinctively reached to steady the pot. Mothers pulled children closer. No one accused her of anything, yet the space around her widened, invisible but undeniable. And still, the incidents continued. One afternoon, a controlled burn at the edge of the fields spread faster than planned. Flames raced along dry grass, threatening the stored harvest. Panic rippled through the village. Men ran with branches, beating at the fire. Women formed lines with water. Through the smoke, Ao appeared, moving against the chaos with unsettling calm. "Go back," someone shouted at her. She didn't. She stopped at a careful distance, eyes fixed on the fire's edge. Her hands clenched at her sides. For a moment, the flames surged higher, roaring as if provoked. Then they slowed. The fire did not die, but it turned, crawling away from the grain as if guided by an unseen boundary. The harvest was saved. No one cheered. People stared. That night, the mood of the village shifted. Gratitude tangled with fear. Protection and danger no longer felt like opposites. The elders spoke again, this time without secrecy. Fire, they reminded everyone, was not to be challenged or commanded. Anyone who drew its attention risked drawing its anger. Eyes turned toward Ao. Children began repeating stories they half understood. Stories of spirits who walked among humans. Of debts owed to flame. Of people marked by disasters long past. None of the stories matched perfectly, but they all pointed in the same direction. Ao felt it. She started avoiding the center of the village. She took longer paths. She chose solitude over shared meals. When someone thanked her for saving the fields, she lowered her head, as if ashamed rather than proud. One evening, a young man confronted her directly. "Why does fire change when you are near?" he demanded. Ao looked at him for a long moment. In her eyes was something old and tired. "Because it remembers," she said quietly. "Remembers what?" "Remembers who?" Before he could ask, she turned away. That night, the wind rose suddenly, rattling doors and scattering sparks across the ground. People rushed to secure their fires. In the confusion, a scream cut through the darkness. A child had wandered too close to an unattended flame. Ao ran. Faster than anyone had ever seen her move. And in that moment, just for a heartbeat, fire surged toward her, bright and furious, as if recognizing her at last. The village held its breath. The scream shattered the night. By the time the villagers reached the clearing, the fire had grown wild, fed by wind and fear. Sparks spun through the air like angry insects. The child stood frozen, too close, too small, eyes wide with terror. Ao was already there. She positioned herself between the child and the flames, arms spread, not to touch the fire, but to block its path. The heat licked at her skin. Sweat traced lines down her face. For the first time, fear was visible in her eyes. "Move her!" someone shouted. But the child could not move. The fire surged higher, roaring as if insulted by her presence. It crackled and snapped, sending embers skidding across the ground. The villagers hesitated, torn between rushing in and stepping back. Then Ao spoke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. "Enough." The word carried no command, yet the flames faltered. Just for a second. Long enough for someone to pull the child away. Long enough for the fire to collapse inward, settling into itself with a hiss of smoke. Silence followed. Not relief. Accusation. People stared at Ao as if seeing her clearly for the first time. This was no coincidence. This was no string of lucky moments. Whatever she was, whatever she carried, it had nearly cost a child's life. Fear hardened into anger. The elders stepped forward, their faces grave. Fire was sacred. Fire was dangerous. Anyone who disturbed its balance endangered everyone. "You must leave," one of them said. Ao did not argue. She nodded once, accepting the judgment with a calm that felt heavier than protest. She gathered her few belongings in silence. No one helped her. No one stopped her. As she walked toward the edge of the village, the wind shifted again. Flames in nearby hearths flared violently, as if reacting to her departure. Pots rattled. Sparks leapt. Panic rippled through the people she was leaving behind. "Ao!" someone cried out. "What is happening?" She turned back. For the first time, her voice trembled. "It's not finished," she said. "It never was." The elders demanded answers. They had waited long enough. Ao hesitated. Her eyes moved to the fires, then to the frightened faces, then to the dark beyond the trees. "I once asked fire for something," she said slowly. "And fire does not give without taking. That was all." She stepped away, disappearing into the night. The village did not sleep. Without her, the fires burned erratically. Some refused to die. Others flared without cause. Smoke choked the air. The people worked through the darkness, exhausted, afraid, unable to understand what had changed. By dawn, the truth became unavoidable. Whatever Ao had been holding back, whatever bargain had been made, it was beginning to break. And without her, the village was no longer safe. By the third day, the fires would not obey. Cooking flames burned too hot, blackening pots and spoiling food. Night fires refused to fade, devouring wood until nothing remained but choking smoke. Even the smallest spark felt dangerous now, unpredictable, alive in the wrong way. The elders called it imbalance. Others whispered a harsher word: punishment. Sleep became impossible. Mothers kept watch through the night. Men took turns guarding the hearths, afraid to turn their backs for even a moment. Every crackle sounded like a warning. And always, the same thought returned. This began when Ao left. At sunrise on the fourth day, the eldest woman in the village made a decision no one else would voice. She took her staff, wrapped a cloth around her shoulders, and followed Ao's path beyond the trees. Others followed her. They found Ao near the river, where the ground was damp and the air stayed cool. She had chosen a place where fire struggled to survive. She sat on a smooth stone, knees drawn close, staring into the moving water as if listening to it speak. She did not look surprised to see them. "I knew you would come," she said softly. "The fire is turning against us," the eldest woman replied. Ao closed her eyes. "Yes." Voices tightened with fear and frustration. "Why?" someone demanded. "What did you do?" Ao pressed her hands together. For the first time, her silence felt heavy, painful. "I tried to save someone," she said. "Years ago," she explained, "there had been another fire. Not a hearth. Not a ritual flame. A reckless fire, born of anger and carelessness, racing through the village like a living thing. It had taken homes, voices, breath. And someone she loved more than herself. In her desperation, Ao had done what no one was meant to do. She had spoken to fire. Not with commands, but with a promise. Fire would spare the village. In return, it would never serve her again. She would not feed it. She would not warm herself by it. She would not use its light. The fire had agreed. 4 years, the balance held. As long as Ao stayed close, watching, refusing, remembering, the fire remained contained. Dangerous, but restrained. "But fire remembers promises," Ao whispered. "And it hates being forgotten." The elders felt the weight of it then, though the truth was still incomplete. "Can this be undone?" the eldest woman asked. Ao turned toward the village, where smoke already rose too thick in the morning air. "There is only one way," she said. She stood. For the first time, she did not turn away from fire. And the village understood. The truth was no longer distant. And it would demand a price. The fire waited. Not like a tool. Not like an accident. It waited like something that knew her. At the edge of the village, where the land rose dry and bare, the flames gathered higher than they ever had before. They did not spread. They did not consume. They pulsed, slow, deliberate, as if breathing. Ao stepped forward alone. The elders wanted to stop her. The people wanted to follow. But something in the air warned them not to cross that invisible line. This was not a moment for witnesses. This was a reckoning. She stood before the fire and finally spoke the truth aloud. Years ago, the blaze that destroyed half the village had been started by a child, frightened, careless, playing too close to danger. That child had been her son. When the flames rose out of control, Ao had run into them without thinking. She did not scream. She did not beg the people. She begged the fire. She offered herself in exchange for everyone else. Not her life, but her future. Fire could live among the village. Fire could be fed and honored. But it would never again belong to her. She would never feel its warmth. Never cook her food with it. Never light the dark with it. She would carry the memory of loss alone, forever separated from the very thing that had taken her child. The fire accepted. It spared the village that night. It spared every life but one. And it bound itself to her presence, contained not by fear, but by her refusal. Every time she turned away, every time she denied herself comfort, she reminded fire of the promise it had made. But when she was driven away, the balance broke. Now the fire demanded completion. Ao stepped closer. Heat pressed against her skin, but she did not flinch. "I have kept my promise," she said. "Now keep yours." She reached out, not to touch the flames, but to welcome them. The fire surged. And then it changed. The roar softened. The flames lowered, curling inward like hands closing in prayer. What had felt angry now felt heavy with grief. The elders felt it then. This was not punishment. It was mourning. Ao did not scream as the heat surrounded her. She closed her eyes, tears carving paths down her face, not from pain, but from release. She had carried the weight long enough. When the fire finally settled, it left behind no ashes, no destruction, only warmth. A warmth that spread gently through the village, controlled, steady, safe. Ao collapsed to her knees, alive, but changed. The fire no longer resisted her. The promise was complete. And for the first time since the night she lost her son, Ao allowed herself to weep, not in silence, but in peace. Morning came softly, as if the world itself was being careful. The fires burned again, but differently now. They rose steady and calm, no longer snapping or surging without reason. Smoke lifted straight into the sky, thin and peaceful. The air felt lighter, easier to breathe. The village gathered in silence. Ao sat near the central hearth, wrapped in a cloth placed gently over her shoulders by the eldest woman. For the first time in years, she did not turn away from the flame. She did not reach for it either. She simply existed beside it, as one exists beside an old scar, acknowledging it without letting it rule the body. No one demanded explanations. They understood enough. The elders spoke of balance, of promises made and kept, of forces that listen even when humans forget they are speaking. But the lesson the people carried was simpler, heavier, and far more human. They had mistaken sacrifice for strangeness. They had mistaken silence for distance. They had mistaken Ao's refusal for fear, when it had always been love. Children approached her cautiously at first, then with curiosity instead of dread. One placed a small bundle of flowers near her feet. Ao smiled, a real smile this time, fragile, but present. That evening, when the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the ground, the village lit its fires together. Stories were told. Food was shared. Laughter returned, hesitant at first, then full. Ao listened more than she spoke. She had not been protecting the village from fire alone. She had been protecting them from forgetting what fire could take. From believing that survival came without cost. From thinking that tragedy belonged only to the past. The fire crackled gently, no longer demanding attention. It had been seen. It had been honored. It had been forgiven. And so had she. Long after the flames settled into glowing embers, the elders passed the story on, not as a warning, but as a remembrance. They told of a woman who refused fire, not because she feared it, but because she loved others more than herself. And they taught their children this. Some people carry their sacrifices quietly. Some acts of love look like absence. And sometimes, the most powerful protection is the pain someone chooses to hold alone. The fire burned on. So did the memory. But neither would ever consume them again.